Good morning. I really wish I were with you, but I took a new job as a visiting professor at the New College of Florida. It's been in the news. There's a lot of uncertainty, etc. But sometimes uncertainty yields an opportunity, and we'll have to see how that goes. Bad news and good news. The bad news is that the talk I planned on tail disparities grew, and it's like I felt like I couldn't really pull it together in a good fashion. So I'm going to give two short talks in place of that. The first is analyzing numeracy textbooks and trying to classify them according to QR versus QL, SR versus SL. We'll see how that goes, provided I can get it changed. Yes, numeracy is a high-level concept, ambiguous, equivocal, and that's the way you want it in a new area. You don't want to have things locked in too tightly when people are trying different things. You want to leave it loose. And the 2 points that to me seem most clear, least disputable, are numeracy is related to mathematics and statistics. Yes. And it focuses less on calculation and proof, more on reasoning and literacy. And mathematical thinking is oftentimes presented as quantitative thinking. Now, I want to take that background and work it into a 2x2 classification scheme. So let's start with a primary classification of numeracy textbooks. That's my population. I've chosen 11 textbooks and classify them focusing primarily either on the mathematical approach or the statistical approach. Statistics working more with data, mathematical working more with functions, distributions. And within these two areas, I want to classify them by whether they focus more on reasoning or literacy. Now that's like splitting hairs, but you'll see what I'm about in doing that. This gives a 2x2 classification. Quantitative reasoning versus quantitative literacy for the mathematical approach. Statistical reasoning versus statistical literacy for the statistical approach. Okay. There's a lot of ambiguity running around here, a lot of flexibility. But here is how I see it. On the top, we have the statistical textbooks. On the bottom, what I consider to be the mathematical textbooks. On the left is the reasoning. On the right is the literacy. Let's start from the lower left-hand corner. We're in the mathematics row, the reasoning column, and I feature 3 books there: Crowder, Sibylla and Summers, Bennett and Briggs. Moving across the bottom to the far right corner, quantitative literacy. That's where I would put Eric Gaze's book, Madison et al. Literacy books with a mathematical approach. And as you can see in the subtitle, quantitative reasoning, I think of math for liberal arts. Quantitative literacy, I think of an emphasis on ratios. And I think an emphasis on ratios is critical. If I had to teach a QRQL textbook, I'd use Eric's book and Madison's cases. Yes, the focus on literacy is central. For me, ratios are the workhorse of the statistics or the workhorse in the statistical literacy stable. They're critical and they are easily misunderstood. High praise for the 2 textbooks in the lower right corner. Moving to the top row, the statistical textbooks. On the far left, those that focus mainly on the quantitative calculation side a bit, but they have a little bit more emphasis on the reasoning side, more on concepts. Take the top set, Utz, Morin Nuts, DeVoe. they almost omit the long trek from the binomial distribution to the central limit theorem to the normal distribution. It's like they say, it can be shown that, and poof, we're moved across that. This is a major step forward on the statistical reasoning side. And of course, there's the big one in the room, Bennett et al., Bennett, Triola, etc. Now, moving toward the right, in the center, I've got two books. Under the top level, statistics, a better focus on categorical data. I consider categorical data closer to literacy than quantitative data. I know, as STEM majors, we prefer quantitative. Statisticians tend to say correlation is not causation. But most students in taking statistics aren't going to see quantitative data. They see categorical data. And so I see Agristi et al. As closer to a literacy approach than the quantitative books. One that nicely incorporates strands from all four areas are the Bolker and Mast textbook. I think this one needs to be featured more highly. In the upper right-hand corner, I've got my textbook, focusing heavily on confounding. I know ratios take into account the size of the group. They eliminate a confounder. But I think most people presume that once you've got a ratio, you're done. You can't do anything more about taking into account something with ratios unless you're using computer software, multivariate regression, etc. No. Students at the University of New Mexico were running 170th semester, and now students at New College in Florida are learning how to take into account influences on ratios without software, without calculus, without algebra, using just 7th grade weighted averages or graphs so they can see what it means to take something into account. I think it's a travesty. I think there's a professional irresponsibility among all of us involved in mathematics and statistical education in not clearly teaching students what does it mean to take something into account. We all know it. But we're so involved in univariate and bivariate statistics that we don't think that to talk about taking a third factor into account requires multivariate thinking. Okay, enough on the advertising. And here are the textbooks. In case you're looking for them, you might have other textbooks. You might classify things differently. But I think we need to know what we're doing when we choose a particular textbook. What is our audience? What do they need? What are the goals of of us as teachers? Are we trying to teach the discipline, or are we trying to meet the needs of our students? Okay, enough on that one. I want to stop that share. I want to get out of that, and I want to go to the other one and get back into Zoom. I want to share my screen. And here we are, and I want to start from the beginning. I want to talk about the GAYS or GUYS, depending on how you say it, guidelines. These are what set the standards for teaching in the introductory course in statistics education. I want to do some analysis, and I want to make a recommendation. Onward. So first, what is this GAISE? It's an acronym for Guidelines for Assessment and Instruction in Statistical Education. You say, okay, it's good to have something like that. Might be interesting to try and put together guidelines for quantitative reasoning, quantitative literacy, statistical reasoning. The 2016 update marked a major change by including two new goals: multivariate thinking and confounding. Neither of these was mentioned previously. I did a survey of 100 statistics textbooks in my office, which is not a random sample. About 80 of them, 80%, never mentioned confounding or lurking variable or covariate in the index. Among the 20 that did, most of them had one example. Early on, when they're saying correlation is not causation or association is not causation, whichever they said. And they showed the burglaries, as burglaries increased, ice cream sales increased. Or they did the California discrimination case, men and women, different disciplines. And then confounding vanished. It was never repeated. I've argued in a previous paper, this is bait and switch. We want to talk about how statistics can be influenced in a statistical inference course. We want to argue that being influenced by randomness. But the example we used to show how statistics can be influenced didn't involve randomness. It involved confounding. What we need is an example involving randomness. Or you need a course that's focused on confounding. Okay, now trying to fit these two new topics into a traditional statistics course, which is already overburdened. I confess, oftentimes I don't get to the last items in the syllabus. It's just too much. The students aren't there. They become closer and closer to the final. They just get overloaded with 2T tests, matching, unmatching, differences, etc. It's just too much. But since 2016, there have been emerging trends in statistical education. Burrell and Thankook recently, 2023, in a very professional summary, put together these emerging trends into 4 groups. Computational thinking at the top, data analysis on the left, visualizing concepts on the bottom, and communication on the right, with technology, data consumer, and data producer in the center. And you say, whoa, this wasn't even mentioned in 2016. We're supposed to put all that on top of what we're doing? It seems obvious, at least to me, that there is no way a single course can cover the GAIS 26 recommendations, which are to include multivariate thinking and confounding, and also include the emerging trends involving data science and computers. There's just no way. Yet, you have to realize that in setting up guidelines, most college students, over 55%, are taking a statistics course as part of their major. The idea that one course could satisfy the statistical needs of all these different college graduates in different majors seems unrealistic in today's world. There's no way one course can satisfy all their needs. Now, recommendations that have been made in the past. Statistical educators have argued for 2 introductory courses. David Moore argued this in 1997 and 8. I argued it most recently in 2015-16. Alan Rossman, 2007, in his plenary address to, I think it was ICOPS, said, quote, "You simply can't achieve these goals," the GAIS 205 statistical literacy goals, "in one course if you also teach a long list of methods." Continuing, most students would be better served by a Stat 100 statistical literacy course than a Stat 101 statistical methods course. Now, these are what? 5, 10, 20 years ago. These recommendations have been out there, but the guidelines haven't adopted it yet. And now, with what's going on today, I'm arguing future GAIS updates should support three intro courses based on the needs of 3 groups of students. We need to focus on the needs, not on what we want to present, what we think is the true and the beautiful and the righteous. No, Stat 100 should be for students in non-quantitative majors. Students that are taking statistics to satisfy a quantitative requirement at their institution. Majors such as history, political science, etc., where the focus is on observational studies and confounding. No algebra. That's my recommendation. Stat 101. This is a traditional course. It's a good course for a particular audience, students in quantitative social sciences, business, econ, sociology, psychology. It can be taught either analytically, historically, or using resampling. That's fine. An algebra requirement makes sense to me. Stat 102, statistics for data scientists. It's the Stat 101 course with a heavy focus on computer usage, programming, and visualization. Yeah, you might get by with using statistical packages, but if you're really talking about data scientists, you should have a programming language. You know, R Studio, whatever. Okay. That's what I think needs to be present in the next update. And until we focus on student needs, I feel like we're looking into the mirror of what we want to do. We're not looking at our students and saying, what do they need in their daily life, in their future professional life? Do the students in the non-quantitative majors need to know about p-values? Do they need to know about the central limit theorem? Do they even need to know about hypothesis tests? Can we teach the concept of statistical significance by just using overlapping or non-overlapping confidence intervals? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. And I know there are some that's going to say, but that isn't right. And I'm saying, I know that. It's not perfect. But we can't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. And I think that's what's happening. Enough on my soapbox. Have a good conference. And my typical ending, take care.